Thought after a Super Bowl. Hey, how are you? Last night in America was the Super Bowl, the 2019 Super Bowl, and it wasn't exactly a super exciting game. Now, as a New England area person, go Patriots. I'm excited that the Patriots won again. I'm excited that Tom Brady got his 6th Super Bowl ring, etc., etc. All kinds of records were set. But I was thinking about it from the perspective of what did it bring to people? What did it bring to the, for the most part, American audience who watched it? Did it mean anything to us? One, it was a really fast and mostly scoreless game. It was just not an especially exciting game to watch unless you really love defense and that feeling of no one can do anything. It wasn't really exciting to me, but I'm not a massive super football fan. I like watching lots of crazy action, and what there was crazy action. But two, and a lot of people feel this way, where we spend our time at Super Bowl is on the ads. So that was kind of interesting, and interesting in that way that I want to talk a little bit about what was covered. So YouTube has a site every year that's kind of interesting called Ad Blitz. And what they do in Ad Blitz is they show us most of the official big game ads. So it was kind of interesting. So Bud Light spent a lot of money, and they spent a lot of money kind of reinforcing their supposedly funny medieval people type advertisement. That was okay. Verizon had the coach who wouldn't be here ad, and I want to talk about that just for a second because, sorry Verizon, but you just got called out for throttling the bandwidth of firefighters out in California during the big campfire. You got caught doing a bad thing to the firefighters and then saying, you guys should have a different level of service if you want really better bandwidth. And so making an ad that says, boy, we really love first responders is definitely a way to try to get the attention and make people feel good. And for people who don't know that that's what happened, then, I guess you could feel good about yourself, but it's not a really good feeling. It's not a good sense that you did a lot to help anybody. The ad in itself is good. It's nice to, honor first responders, but it's not Verizon's voice to say that, especially right now. Jeep ads were okay. They were fine. They were whatever. The ESPN ads, I didn't pay much attention to. Let's see what else we got. 100 billion words. Now, this is a great ad. So 100 billion words is an ad from Google about Google Translate. Now, I'm not making a particular judgment about a company or not, but what I liked about the ad was they were talking about the fact that 100 billion words get translated through Google Translate, and that the two most common ones are "How are you?" and I think the other was "Thank you" or something like that, and then the other was "I love you." And so the point being, in sort of a sweet advertising sort of way, that there is still some hope in the world. There's still some good stuff going on in the world, and that we can be really happy that Google Translate exists so that we can have these conversations. By the way, when they show off in the ad, when they show off the different ways that you can use Google Translate, I use it like that, and I've used it upon traveling and whatnot, but you might not have, and you might go, whoa, I had no idea. So between Google Translate and Google Lens and some of the other technologies, there's some really cool ways to use the technology. So that was a good one. Oil of Olay Killer Skin was just kind of cute. There were lots of trailers. Handmaid's Tale season 3, which was good. One of the best versions of sort of a season ad for something was that what looked like another Bud Light commercial with the medieval people ended up being a Game of Thrones ad. And that ended up going over really well because, of course, you get that feeling like, oh, it's one of these ads. Oh, it's not. It's a Game of Thrones ad. So that was interesting. And for those kinds of fans, I thought it really connected. Google had another hit with Job Search for Veterans. I thought that was a particularly good one. T-Mobile had a lot of fun ads talking about, very common sort of texting things. I think T-Mobile really went out of their way to, make a very direct connection with the people that they hope to serve. And so I want to talk about that for a second, because the people that T-Mobile wants to serve are sort of edgy / rebels / slightly the youth culture. And I think they're doing a good job of reaching out to that and saying, this is who we want to serve. Now, when you reach out to a specific group, it's not like you have to try to exclude other groups, but it sort of self-selects. If you get this sort of feeling like, oh, well, they're not for me, perfect. There's plenty of other wireless carriers. But what's kind of interesting is if someone has that sort of, I feel rebellious and I want to demonstrate that in certain ways, it's interesting that there's now a brand that's saying, we're for you, crazy rebel people. T-Mobile and Taco Bell teamed up, which is an interesting little synergy, and I think it works. I think the kind of person who will find that interesting is definitely the kind of person that T-Mobile is trying to court. So I think that's interesting. Hyundai had an ad for with the elevator about how kind of most car shopping experiences are bad. Kind of funny. One thing I wanted to say about that one is that they annoyed, evidently, vegans for saying that vegans was sort of a level of hell in this elevator. I love it. As a very plant-based eater, I find official vegans sometimes can be a little uppity and sometimes not the best advocates for their own cause. And so teasing vegans is sometimes fun, even for someone who eats mostly plants. But boy, are they upset today. But I don't think Hyundai needed to pick a fight with them, but I also think that the kind of person who's shopping for a car may or may not find some synergy in that, and so maybe there's some other car company that's going to be like, we love vegans, maybe Subaru. My favorite ad of the night. By the way, the reason I'm talking about the ads isn't about ads. I'm talking about relationships and business and connecting and belonging. My favorite ad that totally shows this off so well was Microsoft's commercial called "We All Win," and what I love about it is it's all about people who are differently abled, people who, mostly in this case, who have a physical disability, usually like a missing or damaged limb or something like that, being able to play sports and video games on the Xbox, because instead of a regular Xbox controller like you see in this video, they can now use the accessibility controller from Xbox, and that allows for a much better gaming experience, basically. And it's a super commercial. What's really great about the commercial is it pulls so much emotion about what it's like to play video games and to feel really excited about it and that sort of a thing. And so it's definitely, I think it did such a great job of moving itself and building a better business relationship with people who want to connect on that way. So that was the Microsoft ad, and I thought that was super. In going through some of the rest of them, again, what I want to talk about is sort of how business is looked at through these sorts of ads. Ram was, roar, 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 we're a big tough truck. That's fine. That's how we usually advertise trucks. Lexus has a quarterback safety system. So what's kind of interesting there with Lexus is that geez Louise, I did it again. What's interesting with Lexus is that what they've done is they've said, oh my gosh, I am just failing at touching my buttons here. I'm usually so good at this. That must mean I need more coffee. Lexus and some other car brands are saying, look, we have all this cool technology on board because we're selling cars now, not by their mileage and not by their horsepower and not by the you can get $1,000 off, but by the fact that, front to back, there's Wi-Fi now and tons of cameras and whatever the tech is, it's going to be interesting to a person. So that's interesting to me. Last few that I want to talk about, let's see. Budweiser, Stella. Stella was kind of fun just because it was, people changing up their usual. And I loved seeing Jeff Bridges in there doing the dude again, which was so fun. A lot of robot type stuff, a lot of AI and robot based conversation was in there. So that was sort of interesting. Like I found it very interesting that was something that was going to be covered, I think, the way it did. Let me see. I'm just going to roll through a little bit further. Sleep Number Beds had a whole bunch of, small ads and whatnot. Evidently, very many small ads. Lots of TV stuff, lots of video stuff. Video game stuff was interesting that there were a few of those going. There was an Avengers one for the people who love the Avengers. I want to talk about that for a minute. Not necessarily the Avengers, but just sort of in general. We are starting to recognize that gamer culture and nerd culture is so saturated in our environment that places like the Super Bowl are a place to advertise your video games and a place to advertise your kind of nerdy sci-fi movies. There was an NFL commercial that on its average, the brunt of it was like cool for NFL people who are into the legends of NFL. But they snuck in Ninja from Fortnite, which is such a random thing. The halftime show, which was much maligned by everybody, also had a little tiny nod to Steven Hillenburg, who created SpongeBob SquarePants, who died in 2018. And so that was kind of interesting that they tucked that in. Now, the SpongeBob fan community on places like Reddit has lost their mind because they really thought there was going to be a little bit more to the homage than 2.5 seconds of video. But I feel like, oh my gosh, in this totally not related to SpongeBob kind of universe, I can't believe they stuck a couple of seconds of SpongeBob stuff into the halftime show. To me, that was kind of crazy and legendary and groundbreaking. To other people, they were very upset. A little further on the choice of Adam Levine and Maroon 5, there was, of course, a big push for who's going to do the Super Bowl halftime show, and a lot of acts turned it down. Jay-Z, Cardi B, Rihanna, and they all said the same thing. It's because it was in support of Colin Kaepernick, who is, of course, the quarterback, currently free agent, who started taking a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance to show that he wanted to protest police brutality. Not police, not military, but brutality. And the NFL has said, oh, you could totally do that. And then they've said, no, you can't. And then there's been a lot of back and forth. But it is still a very open wound to people. And it is definitely something that has not been addressed. But there was, again, halftime show goes to Maroon 5. So in Atlanta, which has tons and tons and tons of musical acts, they pick a very basic milquetoast kind of a band like Maroon 5, who aren't awful, I guess, but a lot of people weren't exactly thrilled with it. Also, in the touchy subjects department, Adam Levine takes his shirt all the way off and shows his full bare chest, which is kind of a reminder back to how punished Janet Jackson was for her clothing malfunction and how that all went down. So it's kind of interesting and a little touchy, that this is how it went down. But that's what I want to cover. That's what I want to talk about, is the fact that, here we are in this, national event in the U.S. where you could see elements of when and when not companies are trying to find ways to belong to certain groups or with certain groups, and how even the biggest of companies can say, I'm here for you, maybe not you as much, And also what happens when organizations try hard to make everything bland or generic or safe or whatever. And I think that's a negative. And I think it's going to be more of a negative going forward. I'm totally curious to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment below or drop an email, chris@chrisbrogan.com. Would love to have this conversation.